Hello again. I hope that you're all doing really well. Last time we were together, we looked at the dating of the gospel accounts of Jesus' life and ministry and reflected on how, because they are early, written only a few years after the events they describe, then that gives us some confidence in believing what they say about him. Today, I want to start us thinking about the following generations. It's one thing to have accurate history recorded at the time, but what happens if it changes? Today, I'm going to be thinking about the similarities that we see across time, and next time, we'll be thinking about some of the discrepancies and amendments or changes that are perhaps visible in the manuscripts and take on at first that common argument that there are so many textual variations that it's impossible for us to have the faintest idea what the Gospels originally said about Jesus and what's real and what's false. What's the Jesus of history and the Christ of faith, as they sometimes like to put it. But that's a teaser for next time. For now, we'll think about how the message was transmitted in the first few generations and how that compares to the gospel accounts, how that compares to what we know of Jesus now through the Bible. I won't bore you with all of the names and dates and uh, details of history, but suffice it to say that from, for example, the apostle and disciple John, then we can trace a lineage, if you like, of teaching through what are sometimes referred to as the Church Fathers. Some people don't like the description, they think it's a sexist term to call these people the Church Fathers. It was mostly men that we have the writings of for this period, so that's why they're called that. Um, but if we think about names like Ignatius, Papias, Polycarp, feel free to Google any of these later for an in-depth study of what they believed. These guys were kind of the second generation Christians. These were people who learnt directly from John, and unsurprisingly, what they teach in their works is the same as what John was teaching in his gospel. If we carry on a little later down the line, then we can see Irenaeus, who learnt from the three guys I've just mentioned, Ignatius, Papias, and Polycarp. And again, his teaching is the same as what he had been taught. We go another generation and we see Hippolytus, and unsurprisingly, perhaps, or maybe surprisingly, depending on where you're coming from, he also teaches the same things. In fact, if you just went on the writings of those five chaps that I've just mentioned, Ignatius, Papias, Polycarp, Irenaeus, Hippolytus, this is the kind of picture of Jesus that you would build up. He was conceived by the Holy Spirit, born of a virgin called Mary. A star announced his birth. He was baptized by John the Baptist. He had a teaching ministry on earth. He was humble. He was sinless, unassuming. He spoke words of God, and he taught the Sermon on the Mount. Someone poured ointment on Jesus' head to anoint him. He was unjustly treated and condemned by people to be crucified. This took place when Pontius Pilate was the governor of Judea and Herod was the tetrarch, the king. Jesus died on the cross. He was buried. He was resurrected in a physical body, and that was demonstrated by his appearances to Peter and the other disciples, by him appearing in the room and offering for them to touch him, touch the wounds that had been made in his hands, in his side, that he ate with the disciples. We know that the disciples were absolutely convinced by the resurrection and became fearless in the face of opposition, declaring the divinity of Jesus, that he had been raised from the dead. We'd know that Jesus returned to the Father after a period of time after his resurrection, being visible and physically there on earth. We would know that Jesus is our only Lord and the Son of God, that he is the one who created all things and that creation belongs to him. We'd have phrases like Jesus being the door, the bread of life, the eternal word, which is probably unsurprising given that this line traces back to John, who uses all these phrases in his gospel. We would know that it is faith in Jesus and not anything that we do for ourselves that assures us of salvation. We'd know that that salvation and forgiveness of sin is a gift, a free gift of God to anyone who will accept it. And we'd know that Jesus will come back to judge the living and the dead. Now, that is all very, very much what we know from the Bible now. It's what we know from the Bible now. It's what we know from the manuscripts from which our Bibles were translated. It's what we see in the early generations of Christianity, and it's what we see in the Gospel accounts themselves. You see, the message of Christianity is consistent. Even if we didn't have any of the New Testament writings, we would still be able to know who Jesus is and what he has done for us from the writings of those who followed the disciples down the generations. That's all we're going to think about today. Next time, we're going to spend a bit of time thinking about those discrepancies, because it's all very well saying, well, we know all of this stuff. But is it true when some people say there are hundreds of thousands of differences within the documents that we have of the New Testament? I think it is. But we'll find out next time. Take care and God bless.